Welcome to this installment of the Secure Your DNS, Secure Your Network video series. My name is Tim Rooney, Director of Product Management at BT Diamond IP, and the goal of this video series is to break down into bite-sized chunks the many ways that the domain name system, or DNS, can be attacked or manipulated for nefarious purposes, and to provide suggested means that you can implement to defend yourself, defend your DNS implementation from such attacks or such manipulation. Today we're going to talk about denial of service attacks or distributed denial of service attacks. The attack objective is to inundate a DNS server such that it cannot respond to legitimate queries. So it's much like a common DOS attack that you hear about other network services or routers. You're basically trying to pound the device such that it's unable to process packets as it normally would for legitimate users. So the impact of the attack is that all your clients and your servers that are attempting to use that service may have excessively long timeouts, the response time may go down, or the actual response can be nullified by timeouts on the receiving side. So here we have an attacker either through one vehicle or multiple. Here I'm showing three input vectors to this attack where this is the distributed form, where I'm using multiple sources of the attack, and again they're basically inundating this server with excessive packets such that it is unable to process all of these packets from the attacker as well as the legitimate packets, and thereby the legitimate packets, many of them are being unanswered by the DNS server, for example. There are various forms of this attack. TCP SYN attack, where you basically issue the SYN, you get the OK, you don't send the ACK. So you leave that TCP connection open. UDP flood is you're basically pounding the server with UDP packets. There's also the ICMP flood. It's basically a ping type of attack where you're, again, pounding the server with packets. Or DNS query flood, just issuing queries and making the server run on a wild goose chase, so to speak, and tie itself up doing all that and unable to process legitimate packets in a timely manner. And then the distributed form of this attack, of course, is using distributed points. And we've seen this a lot lately in recent years through the various botnets that attackers are using, and really using default passwords on IoT type devices, for example, to be able to enlist them within the attacker's botnet and then call to action when they need to issue a DOS attack, or when they want to issue a DOS attack against a given target, and flood that target with packets such that it's unable to provide the desired service. One way you can mitigate this attack is through Anycast addressing. So an Anycast address is an IP address assigned to multiple interfaces, typically on different devices. So it's got the same IP address. The impact on the DDoS is it spreads the attack flow from one target to several. So again, I'm issuing an attack, I'm issuing a packet to a given destination IP address, and by Anycast I've actually assigned that IP address to multiple end devices. The routing infrastructure just considers it multiple ways to get to a given IP address, and so it routes that to the nearest from a traffic congestion perspective based on the routing protocol you're using, and enables that attack to be spread out. As we see here, I'm spreading out, let's say I'm assigning that three servers the same Anycast address, and in essence it greatly dilutes the attack. So instead of all of these packets hitting one server, it's spread out, and thereby lessening the impact on each one individually. There's been demonstrated success of Anycast addressing on the root server attack in 2007, and I invite you to check out that PDF from 8th of March 2007, the attack, which provides a nice readout of the attack and how Anycast addressing helped to mitigate that attack. So certainly that's one way you can help to mitigate your denial of service attacks, configure Anycast addressing. You also want to consider deploying hardened appliances, so reducing ways that an attacker can bring an appliance down through, let's say, an operating system vulnerability or another application running on the server. IP packet rules, so drops and rate limits. So basically an invalid source address, you don't want to allow a private address, source address coming in from the outside, for example. So you want to provide basic rules, at least from the valid IP addressing perspective. Source rate limits, if you can limit that, how many packets a given host can send, or a given network of hosts can send, to be able to give them a quota and not allow them to go over. Addressing fragmented packets, UDP malformed packets, likewise with TCP. and also ICMP packets or ping packets or other Internet Control Message Protocol packets that you want to be able to limit or even drop right away. So by dropping these packets or otherwise handling them separately, really offloads the server a bit in terms of having to run them up the stack within the server. For example, if you drop them right as they're coming into the server, it can certainly help lessen the load of the attack. In terms of the server hardening, the National Institute of Standards and Technology has published a special publication, 800-123, which provides standards for hardening a server. So just highlight some of those here and some of the steps you can take. Plan the deployment installation, so deploy a redundant server, having Anycast, for example. But regardless of Anycast or not, make sure you maintain your server inventory, know what you've got out there, what the IP addresses are, etc. Securely install the operating system of the server. Disable non-purposed accounts, services, applications, ports. So you want to lock it down with respect to what that server is able to do from a protocol perspective, and also maintain patch and upgrade levels. You want to securely secure the DNS server software, so depending on what server DNS application you're using, whether it's ISE bind or not, DNS, power DNS, etc., you want to set that up in an isolated execution environment, so should it be compromised, the attacker is not able to bound out of that execution environment to perform further attacks on the server or the network. Secure your DNS information, so the DNS resource records and the zones that you have deployed. Other than certainly you want to publish DNS information for people to query, but you don't necessarily want to make it too open that people can footprint your zone, for example, to identify attack targets through a reconnaissance perspective. So configure DNS controls. You can control who can access the various controls on the server to load a zone, freeze a zone, etc. Using, let's say, remote name domain control, RNDC, for example, in the ISE bind case, to make sure you control your control channel. And also support administrator authentication and access controls, as you should for every server that you have out there. SSH keyed access, separation, and also least privilege access. So really, this is really a common approach across all of your infrastructure, but it applies equally to DNS. And then also implementing network protection, configuring your operating system and DNS controls in terms of access to the network. Again, we talked about allowing appropriate IP addresses or IP networks, who can query the server, for example, who can control the server. So providing ACLs and also rate limiting that you might have at the server level are also another good step. And then really from a maintenance perspective, reviewing and auditing access command logs, who did what when, certainly from a follow-up perspective, but also just on a periodic auditing perspective to just keep an eye on things and also perform routine backups. So should a compromise be experienced, you have the ability to back up your configuration and restore that upon restoration of the server after the attack. Hopefully this gives you some steps you can take to protect your DNS servers from distributed denial of service attacks.